We are recording.
Hello and welcome to Sheffield Hopcast, in which is hopefully our last episode until we can all go back to the pub, which would be nice. But don't get too excited because it's basically 100% going to rain. So, this week we've got a usual guest, and that guest has influenced the theme this week, which means I set some homework for two different things: getting a beer and matching it with some music. So the risk of sounding like Strictly Come Dancing, this week is Music Week. So there we go. So I've asked everybody to think back to a recent or fond live music experience before lockdown, and then match a beer to go with that band or a song by that band. And I think me and Laura were chatting earlier. I think we're going to put like a Spotify playlist together of any kind of songs that we're linking to music through this episode, so people can kind of have a multi-level experience. So we'll see how it goes. It might just be 4 songs of what we've picked tonight. So anyway, this week we've got Luke Murphy from Rhythm and Brews podcast. Thought I'd come to you first, actually, Luke, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So hi. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Do you want to have just a quick few words about history of the podcast, what it's all about, maybe kind of why we do, and how it links to kind of what we're doing today, I suppose, and then how music can be, how flavors can influence music, and whatever you do, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, sure. So Rhythm and Brews. So we're a monthly podcast that has been going on for, almost 4 years now. It's just feels like way too long to be drinking beer and matching music. I think we've actually run out of choices now. But yeah, it kicked off. So it's me and my partner in crime, Andrew. And it kicked off, actually, we were doing a music podcast for about 3 years before the beer podcast. And he went to Green Man Festival out in the middle of somewhere in West England. I've actually got no idea where it's based. But and he saw Pete Brown doing his music and beer matching thing, which he sort of got from an article that somebody wrote about how tones can influence how your beer can taste. So we thought we'd give it a go. Did a pilot episode, and then since then we've managed to keep it up monthly, apart from a 3-month break at one point. But I attempted to not drink for 3 months, and it lasted about 3 weeks. But it's fine. But so there is science behind it, but it is
science.
All, I mean, we're allowed to swear on this podcast, aren't we?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's complete dog shit. But
I like how you pick dog shit as your swear word.
Yeah,
Good choice.
As the beers come out, the swearing will get worse. But the whole concept behind it is that apparently there was a study done where tones can change the way that you experience flavors. And they did it with sort of pure tones, so like 44 hertz kind of thing or whatever. And the idea is that the lower the tone, the more that the bitterness in what you're tasting will be enhanced. The higher the tone, the more the sweetness will be enhanced. And then they also found that if you play discordant tones, things appear more sour, which is quite cool. But I mean, at first we kind of tried to lean on the science very heavily, and then we just discovered actually it's much more interesting to talk about like the experiential nature of the beer. And I mean, most people have with songs, they've got particular, associations with that song, somewhere where they've heard it, where they've experienced it. And you can quite often match the experience of a song with the experience of a beer and make the whole thing better, is the idea behind it, and make, or like change the experience of how you're drinking the beer. So that's the whole concept behind it.
It kind of fits more to kind of what we've kind of doing, thinking fondly at past music experience, and then trying to turn that into what would that be in a beer, or that experience, or a song by that band or whatever. So do you want to start? What beer have you got, and what band or song are you matching that with?
So I mean, for me it was very easy. I have very fond memories of the last gig I went to, which was Valentine's Day last year. Went and saw Los Campesinos at Islington Assembly Hall in London. Are you guys sort of au fait with Los Campesinos, or?
I am, okay. But for the listeners, you want to kind of...
they're like a 8-10 piece. I don't know. They've got way too many members. very angular indie band who kind of have associations back to like the emo scene of like the early 2000s, but did that kind of weird thing in the sort of mid 2000s, like Dan and Aykroyd and Dance Gavin Dance and all that scene, where it was like very wordy, overly emotional music over very weird, discordant indie that is also very danceable and very sing-alongable. um, um, so I went last February, got to go see them because I was doing the 10th anniversary of Romance is Boring, which is like one of their big albums, and they played the entire thing in full, and then came back and did like a bangers set as well, and it was one of the most phenomenal gigs I've been to in the last few years. So it was a kind of nice way to end it all before going into fucking lockdown shit, where we haven't been able to see live music since then. So yeah, so that's the band, and the song that I've picked specifically is off of the album Romance is Boring, which is I just sighed, just so you know. And the beer, so basically, for anybody who's listened to Rhythm and Brews, I have some pretty sort of standard go-tos, and Los Campesinos are like my go-to for sour beers, because they're like fully discordant and angular and a little bit weird and loud and raucous, and I don't know, I just feel like a good sour beer matches well with that. So I've actually gone for Unity Brewing, and I've gone for their Orange Ghoster Preserver #1, which I haven't cracked open yet, so I'm going to do that now.
Very good, cool. Should we go to the Rangeley's next? Laura, what beer? Hello, by the way. Have you got any beer t-shirts, attire on or anything today?
I've got a Mondo jumper on today.
Mondo. Very good, very good.
From London. I think probably the last tap room we went to before lockdown for my birthday last year.
Very good. So beer and music, what have you gone for?
So I've picked something that I feel represents the experience that I had at a gig that we went to. It's probably just over 2 years ago now. But we went to see Enter Shikari at the O2 Academy. And the day of the gig, we'd been doing sensory training at work. So I'd spent 6 hours smelling and tasting things with very, very minute attention to detail. And I just, like complete sensory overload in the flavour department. And we walked into the O2 Academy, which in Sheffield is a pretty nice gig venue. And I was just in there like, oh my God, it absolutely stinks in here. Why does it smell like pickled onions? Like just everything that was there was just like, oh my God, this is really, this is quite an intense experience. And then Enter Shikari came on, who, for anybody that doesn't know them, they are not a quiet, peaceful, non-intense band. It's very discordant is a good word. I'm going to steal that from Luke. There was this huge light show, there were lasers, and I was just like absolutely blown away and didn't really know what to do. I thought I was going to die from all of the things that were just happening in my brain. But it was great. They were absolutely fantastic. So I thought, seeing as that was after a day of drinking beer as well and thinking about beer, what kind of beer could I choose that might sort of sum that up? So I've gone for one of the oddest beers in our cellar that has a hell of a lot going on, and it is this. Is a collaboration between the Kromme Haring, who are based in Utrecht in the Netherlands, and Wildewald, which is a project by a German home brewer, but who is really, really into yeast, called Benedict. And they actually brewed it in time for the first carnival we went to in 2018. And it's a wild fermented Lichtenhainer, which is a smoked sour beer with peaches in it. I did actually have this beer when we were at Carnival, and I was really, really hungover and sat by a barge right by the canal and looking out. It was this lovely day and feeling also like I was going to die a little bit. And you wouldn't have thought that a smoked sour peach beer was the thing to make you feel better, but it did. So
standard. Yeah.
So I've gone for that. Something a little bit weird, with quite a lot going on, and in that way, I feel that it represents my good experience.
What strength is that, out of interest?
It's only 4.5. I did nearly bring a different really weird beer that was 12.5, but then I saw what Jim was bringing and decided against that. For reasons that will become clear shortly. So yeah, sensible TV, but daft, delicious beer.
Yeah.
Come on then, Jim. I thought I'd invite you. I thought Jim likes his music, and I thought he'll do a good job at matching some beer and music.
So I'm going from Laura's light beer to heavy beer, but also heavy gig. So at the same venue at the Academy in Sheffield a little bit longer ago. I think it was a few years ago now. But Gojira, who are a French like heavy metal kind of industrial band, who just write riffs that are the weightiest riff, slow, punchy, great. And then live, they're even heavier. So some just encapsulating everything about kind of the intensity of proper heavy music. They're just amazing. But they write a lot about the environment and that kind of thing. But a lot of their kind of tours and a lot of their kind of talking about and their lyrical content is about human destruction of the planet. In fact, at the moment, they've just launched a fundraising campaign for an Amazonian group, an indigenous Amazonian group, to try and reinvest in Brazilian rainforests. So, trying to put something else back and trying to put funding back into restoring and supporting the lungs of the world. But in that, with all their heavy music, I've picked The Heaviest Matter in the Universe, a song called The Heaviest Matter in the Universe, and it is quite heavy. So in keeping with that, I've gone for the strongest beer that we have in our cellar, which is the Mikkeller Black Imperial Stout, which is this release is a 16.1% Imperial Stout. Lots of brown sugar, lots of dark malt, fermented with champagne yeast and ale yeast, just to bring that ABV up as high as possible. So yeah.
And it is.
Have you had it before?
Past 5.
I really like the fact that to like the uneducated ear, Enter Shikari would sound quite heavy, and similarly the Lichtenheiner would be like a sort of heavy going beer. But then when you compare it to Gojira and a 16.1% Imperial Stout, it's like both of those. Yep, no, that totally tracks in comparison. Yes.
It sounds like that's their kind of session beer, like on the rider, just like pint of 16%.
Please.
I think they just do pints of cognac, don't they? Like that's standard.
I think we saw them on a Jägermeister tour. It was either Jägermeister or
yeah, it was. It was.
And so they're sponsored by Jaeger.
Yeah.
They'll be drinking horrible spiced sweets.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like how if any of you guys have ever been to Slam Dunk up in Leeds, and it's like one of the heavier tents is usually sponsored by Fireball or Jaeger, and it's like, yeah, that sounds about right. It's
Right, James, I'm going to hope you're going to go more complex and more insane and music and everything than that. So what were you going for?
I've already opened my beer because you all keep using words that I don't understand and that don't mean anything to me. So I just thought I'm just going to get drunk because this is probably the theme that I've struggled with the most due to the fact that I'm not massively into live music. I like music. I subscribe to Spotify Premium. What more evidence do you need? But
that's just as good.
I'm not massively into gigs, and you all keep using words and phrases. I'm just thinking I got a fucking clue what they're talking about. So I've gone very literal. So it's actually not the last gig that I went to. I did go to a gig in Hamburg when I was there, which was weird. But the last kind of thing that I can remember that was like a music event, which is something that we've talked about a few times actually here, which is the last time that Tramlines was held, which was summer 2019. For anyone that doesn't know, Tramlines is a big, well, it used to be a big inner city festival, music and beer festival, I guess you'd call it. But no, it's more music, isn't it? It just tends to have good beer there, which used to be held in the centre of Sheffield. It's now moved out of the centre, so you can't really call it an inner city festival anymore. But it's a brilliant event. We always have a good laugh there. If you're a regular listener to the podcast, you know, we've done a few kind of collaborations with them as well. Wasn't able to happen last year. Kind of hanging in the balance a little bit this year. It's kind of like unknown as to whether or not I'll be able to go ahead. Fingers crossed, really hoping that it does. But the last time we were there, and actually this is a subject that we've touched on, I think it was Adam that you talked about this actually off the back of the last Tramlines, which was of all the great beers that were there, we actually ended up, because of the big bars, like the main bars, weren't selling very much in the way of craft beer. It was all a bit kind of towny, lagery stuff, but they were selling Camden Pale. So we ended up drinking a lot of Camden Pale. So that is what I've gone with for my beer. And there's various bands that kind of stand out from it, but the song that really stands out for me from the last Tramlines, which is the one I'm going to go for, is Reverend and the Makers' Silence is Talking, which I think might have been their last song of their set last time, or it might have been the Tramlines before that it was the last song of their set, but it really kind of stands out to me. Nearly went for something by Shed 7 because they were great at Tramlines.
Or Sleeper.
Sleeper were also very good. Yeah, I used to love Sleeper, blimey. And Mr. Motivator as well was one of my favourite performers, but he didn't do any songs, so can't go for him, unfortunately. And I couldn't think of a beer that links to Mr. Motivator, so abandoned that. And yeah, I've gone very literal with Camden Pale, which is a really good beer.
Very good. Which links back to you actually, Luke, because you had Ed Cousins on, didn't you, a few months ago from Reverend and the Makers?
Yeah, so for our January episode, we actually had Ed Cousins, who is sort of the co-songwriter and lead guitarist in Reverend and the Makers, great solo artist too, who actually linked to beer as well, used to run the bar in one of the main Thornbridge pubs up in Bakewell, and actually co-brewed a whole bunch of beers with them as well. So yeah, they've got like good ties to beer, Reverend and the Makers.
Yeah, I've actually
he has another new beer coming out, doesn't he? Ed,
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think it's coming out any day now that he's got a new beer coming out. So very timely.
Yeah,
I've noticed his new. He started a new kind of YouTube series where he's just chatting about like the life, and that's actually filmed in the Bath Hotel at Sheffield. So, yeah, very iconic building. I miss the Bath Hotel. That's one of the pubs I really want to go back to when it opens up. Cool. I had about 3 different ones I wanted to do because I've had a big period where I've not been to any gigs for ages. I used to go to gigs a lot, and then kids and I don't know, beer came first, I think. And but then weirdly, I went to 3 gigs really close to lockdown. I went to see Jimmy Eat World, and I went to see American football in Leeds, and also Idlewild. And I wanted to pick American football because of the story I might have mentioned about. We went to Leeds with my friend who was quite into his more classic craft beers and gets annoyed when people put silly things in beers. And then we went straight to North Brew's new bar, and he just went, I'm just going to have one of Triple Fruit Goes. And I'm like, I don't want that. Ed had that, loved it, went straight back, got a different one. And then we disappeared up to, is it Whitelocks or Whitlocks? I never know how to pronounce it. The Whitelocks. Joking that obviously that's a much more classic pub. We'll have something, sort of cask and flat. And then we were joking that you never get anything like Triple Fruit Goes on, and then they had it on cask. so we decided to have half a landlord and half a Triple Fruit Goes, and we called it our like Cornish pasty, because the traditional Cornish pasty being half savoury, half sweet.
That is amazing.
But it's not triple fruit Goes season, so anywhere.
Triple fruited Ghosts are on cask as well.
Yeah,
Oh, yum.
I'm not sure I preferred it, but for the novelty, it's still good. So yeah, I went to see Idlewild. Idlewild are a band I've been into since it started, really, in the 90s, a Scottish band. It's actually the 25th anniversary, and I've just recently got a nice book about the history, and I've been reading through all that stuff. Yeah, and I kind of feel that they've kind of gone through a lot of stuff, but they started off quite a spiky band. They were quite like sort of trying to be sort of punk with a mixture of stuff and poetic punk and stuff, but then they've kind of mellowed. But even listening back to their first album and second album, there's some quite like nice melodic sort of stuff as well. So, and also it's a band that I keep going back to, and they're kind of one of my classic favorite bands. And it's actually a beer I keep going back to, which for a beer that isn't a core range beer, I don't think I've gone back to this beer as much recently as any, and it's one of yours, Jim. I'm assuming you've brewed had something to do with this, as it's Abbeydale's Unbeliever Margarita Sour. So just reading on the back, it's kind of obviously the sour and the spikiness and kind of punky bits, but also says there's a lovely silkiness and hints of sweetness in the finish, and I thought that could be accredited to any Idlewild song. So I kind of picked When I Go Icy Shapes from their first full-length album, which is probably their breakthrough single, thinking about 1997. I don't think it's their kind of most spiky of songs, but I thought it's kind of has a bit of both. And I think this range itself, you're saying that you have some things that are quite sour and other things that are a bit mellower. So, but I've really, really enjoyed this. It's so drinkable. I know I had a drink. I had a can of it the other night, and I thought, oh, I wonder if I could even get another can of it. And luckily, in my local shop, they had one there sitting for me.
I had that for the first time last week because it was the same. I walked into a local bottle shop here around the corner from me. So we've got we talk about it all the time on the podcast, but we've got the amazing beer shop in Hitchin, and it's always good. But sort of went into another random bottle shop, and they had an awesome range of craft beers, including a whole bunch of Abbeydale and Buxton beers. And it was like, oh fuck, I've hit jackpot here. And so yeah, picked up the Margarita Sour, and I have to say it was also my first rehearsal back with my band last week. So we're prepping for our album, and it was one of the best sort of rehearsal beers I've ever had. I felt like I should have been paying it more attention than just sort of slamming it back while screaming into a microphone. But
yeah, it's quite strong, and it's 5.6. So like, I know that it's strong enough, isn't it, to neck a few of these, but yeah, it just sits on the right side of sweet and sour and just really delicious. And I don't know what are you happy with it, Jim? Did you brew it, or is it part of your? Is it more of a?
Yeah, so it was a blend of a beer that we had that was souring in barrel, and a beer that a fresher beer as well. So I think that those layers come from the kind of the freshness and the kind of aging of sour. So you kind of get a nice balance between it. And then I think because there's so many nice things in there, there's lemons and limes and lemongrass and things like that, which I think just keep it a bit fresh and a little bit sweet, and add a little bit more to it than just adding loads of fruit. So I think that's kind of the balance there, I think, works for me, and I was pleased with the way that it turned out.
Stuff. The obvious thing to talk about, just generally about beer and music, is beer in music venues, or just beer in venues. I know, Laura, you were saying you had an opinion on it, and something you wanted to maybe bring up. I mean, we all know it's pretty crap, isn't it? Just generally. I think
cans of Red Stripe. There's
a time and a place for
That reminds me of Plug, cans of Red Stripe, strutting round Plug, drinking straight from the can. Wow.
I think I've drunk more Red Stripe in parks than I have in gig venues though these days. Like it feels like it's one of those kind of beers. It's that or K-cider.
I'm very much I will come back to you, Laura, but just on that point, I very much tend to go to cider, basically, in crap music venues. But yeah, sorry, Laura, we jumped on that bit.
I think it's just something that I have a real bugbear about, because it's like, I don't understand why there is like, in very, very few venues, there's like nothing for anybody that actually wants to drink nice beer. And I'm very much the same. Like, I will happily drink multiple pints of Tuborg out of a manky paper cup at a festival, and that is fine. But it's not what you want all the time, is it? And I think it's just something that it really grinds my gears that there's such a huge opportunity there, and especially when you've got so many bands that work with, you know, the collaborations between breweries and bands coming out all of the time, and, you know, people who, you know, the worlds interlace quite a bit, I think, but that's just not reflected in any of the events that are on. I do know one of my favourite beer at a gig story though was a couple of years ago, went down to Nottingham and went to Rock City to go and see Machine Head. And Jim and I were both supposed to be going, and then Jim selfishly went to Detroit for work. So
bastard.
I don't really want to go to Nottingham on my own, and luckily found my friend Nikos, who sadly doesn't live in Sheffield anymore, but who has similar taste in beer and music to the kind of things that we do, and he came with me. And yeah, he's really, really into, you know, bottle swapping with beer traders in America. You know, has a really, really kind of high-end opinion of beer, and you know,
has a cellar full of aged gers.
Yeah.
And that kind of...
And anyway, he potted off to the bar when we got to the gig, and he came back with a plastic super pint, and I was like, Nico, please tell me you don't have 2 pints of Tuborg. And he bought 4 cans of Beavertown Gamma Ray and put them in the 2-pint cup.
About 40 quid.
Oh, ouch.
You know, Neck Oil and Gamma Ray were available at Rock City, and I did, you know, I think that's a really good option to have. You know, it's not difficult, surely, to have.
It's a step in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
I think because it comes down to, it's especially O2 venues. Like O2 venues are tied to, is it
Heineken,
maybe?
probably.
Is it Heineken then? Yeah.
I don't know.
Whoever has Tuborg, I can never bloody remember. It's one of the big ones. But yeah, and it's because Signature were trying to do this for years. That's why they started, right? It was to get good beer into music venues, and I feel like they started to make some inroads, and then everything just collapsed for them. Like even Slam Dunk that I was talking about before, they used to sponsor a stage and set up one bar in the entire festival to serve good beer, and everywhere else was the standard trash, plus Jägermeister and Fireball, and then they had the Signature bar. They got pushed out about 2 years ago, because the bigger alcohol sponsor basically said, we're not happy about them being here anymore, so fuck them off.
Like they were going to do anything to make a dent in any kind of way to their profits, really.
Although I did like the fact that the first year that they weren't there, the beer sold out by about 6 p.m. So it was like a good sign of the end times of Signature not being included. But you know,
yeah, and we'll be thinking about festivals and stuff like probably a similar kind of size to Slam Dunk. Tramlines is probably a similar sort of size, and I know like you guys have had kind of quite a bit of involvement, and there's always been, over the years since it started, they've always like done a Tramlines beer, and it's gone through, you know, Thornbridge have done one, Bradfield have done one, you guys have done one, and even a couple of years where there were like a competition where I think 4 breweries put one in, and then they had a night at a pub, and you could just drink them like beer 1, 2, 3, 4 blind, and then you had to vote for which one you wanted. So, but and you've always kind of supplied quite a bit of beer to Tramlines, and I know Thornbridge they had their own bar last year before now, isn't it? Because obviously went last year, but so I mean there is a place for it, and people do drink it. If they didn't drink it, it wouldn't be there, would it? I mean, I don't know what your guys' experience in terms of how much of that kind of gets drunk or sold, or is it?
I think it came from, obviously, before Tramlines was a single venue and it was based in pubs. You know, and having a Tramlines beer was something that could bring all of those venues together, and that they could all have you know, it was almost like you know, a bit of branding for the festival almost, and something that was recognizable across all of them. And so that was a really nice idea. And I think then when it went to being, you know, its own kind of more self-contained thing, they knew that the beer was something that people enjoyed as a part of it. So that was able to kind of remain. So yeah, I think
because it's always been there, I think that they've always had, when they've moved to that single site now down in Hillsborough Park, they've always had the real ale tent, and then they've had other lager bars. So it's always been there and always been part of the infrastructure of the festival, as opposed to being the other way, like Slam Dunk, where they have bars sponsored by and provided by big companies who can dictate. Because if they say, no, we don't want to be involved anymore, you've lost like 80-90% of your beer supply, just because you want some nice beer for some people on one bit of stage over in the corner. So they can dictate, and that's not just a problem with them at beer festivals. That's the problem industry-wide, pub-wide, tide line-wise. They dictate everything, and you across the market, because they've got the money. And so, but at tram lines, where they kind of have, they always sell out of beer partway through, and we more often than not have to go and do
some more.
a dropping beer off, and we always have beer prepped so that they can have more. We kind of expect it for tram lines. So there is the demand there. It just needs more festival organisers and people to realise that they can get it from people.
Which brewery made the Metallica beer the other year? Because that was a really big brewery. I can't remember who it was now.
I was just fishing through like the top 20, not top 20 beers, but 20 beers made by, in collaboration with, they're all metal bands. They're all like kind of like mainly like kind of classic ones, Motorhead, AC/DC.
Yeah.
I was going to do a little competition, see if you could guess what the beers are, but then I got through about 5, and then it started being really obvious, like Sepultura Pale or something like. It's like a bit of a giveaway. Just a scoop. Go on, James.
I was going to say, to answer Laura's question, it was Stone that did the Metallica.
Oh,
yeah. Got this absolutely excellent plastic.
Great little plastic cup.
Look at that.
But yeah, so obviously Stone are a massive brewery, but again, that was another step for me in showing a bit more overlap.
Because we've brewed, Abbeydale have brewed in the past with 65 Days of Static that came through one of our four tram lines, and around the release of, I think, an album a couple of years ago, Red Parallax, which was part of one of the songs was Red Parallax off that album. Either way, it was kind of launched. So we've kind of done bits in the past, and with some local bands. But yeah, it doesn't happen particularly often, but it is mainly with bands who have riders that involve.
Actually, what was that? Me and we brought this up before, James. What was that really, really nice beer that you did with that Sheffield band? Oh, what's it called?
I think I'm actually looking for that very beer right now. Was it like a passion fruity something?
It was a bit like a indie kind of band.
Alvarez Kings.
Alvarez Kings, yeah. What was that beer? That was such a good sort of.
We made it with Brewdog Bar in Sheffield and Alvarez.
There we go. Remember. I've got a feel like it's got a word that starts with a Q in it, James. If that helps, but
See,
like quiet or something. Is it quiet conscience or something like that? I don't know.
Old conscience.
Oh, look at that. Where did I pull that from? That's years ago.
Good job.
Old conscience is there.
It was a 4.5% pale ale with a difference, packed full of mangoes and lychees. Lychees is a great word, isn't it? Because it sounds like it could be some kind of really horrible maggot or something, but actually it's really nice fruit.
Or like a skin condition. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. Oh God, you've got lychees. Can't leave the house for a month when you got lychees.
Wow.
James,
it's a good beer. That I think we should bring that back. I'm going to start a campaign.
Bring it back.
Bring it back.
James, you're saying you don't really go to gigs much, but I was thinking about music in pubs generally, and the kind of that role that plays. And if it's important, is it annoying? Is it a good thing? Because we all like to drink in the Rutland, and Rutland Arms has a chalkboard which tells you very strictly what you cannot play on that jukebox in any one given day. It's all done with a little bit of jest, it's a bit of a joke, but
it has, yeah. There's certain bands that are always banned, isn't there? That you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to.
Do you prefer
it
a pub
is
with
important though, isn't it? Because I think I would. In complete sobriety, I would tell you that I'm now at a stage where I appreciate a quiet pub that's maybe got a little bit of background music, but actually you can have a conversation. And yet, in the same evening that I tell you that, I will end up in the Washington dancing like an idiot till 2:00 in the morning. For Luke's benefit and anyone that's listening, the Washington is, it's not really a live music pub as such. It's a bit of an indie pub, and it's a bit scruffy, but it's brilliant. It's just the place where you end up, and I think it's open until something stupid like 4 a.m. or something daft. And many of the night I've just completely lost in there. And so yeah, clearly music is really important when you have beer. And what I like now is that you've actually got a reasonable amount of choice, because you've got quite a lot of bars where they are fairly quiet. They are about sitting and having a conversation. Lots of micropubs that tend not to have loud music and stuff like that on, that are just about being able to sit with your mate and have a bit of a chat. And then you can walk around the corner and you can go somewhere that's actually got a little bit of atmosphere going on and has got a bit of music and something that that you're really into, but also sells really good beer. And that's really good. I just kind of hope that, I think we all have to concede that the pub world is going to shrink a bit, and I hope that we don't lose too much of that choice.
Yeah.
Talking of Washington, and also linking back to one of your shows, because you recently played one of those songs. When I first moved to Sheffield and I was drinking in places like Washington, before there were that many kind of, I wouldn't have considered it like an ale pub or anything. I used to always see Richard Hawley in there. Like every time I went in, it was Richard Hawley was in there, looking really cool with his kind of, his hair slicked back and his nice clothes and that. But it's pint of Guinness. But I
feel really bad for calling it scruffy. I don't think that's fair. But it's sweaty, and it's like the dance floor is packed. It's that kind of place. It's not scruffy. They clean it, it's a nice. Well, the toilets are a little bit dodgy, but they do clean it.
As soon as you said scruffy, I knew exactly what you meant. Like, it's that slightly rough around the edges, intentionally a little bit dirty.
Always a really wet floor. Always a really wet floor in the toilets for no apparent reason.
Yeah. And you can't see anything that's leaking, so you're like, oh, there's only really one possibility here, isn't there? But yeah, at the same time, I think the thing about the Washington, and there's probably pubs like this in every city around the country, probably around the world, is that it's a long way from perfect, and yet you walk in and it just feels like home. It just feels like you belong there, and that's an amazing feeling.
If it's the second time I've had an alarm
I believe that's my smoke alarm going off. So I'm really hoping the kitchen isn't on fire.
There we go.
No, it's gone off now. It's fine.
This literally happened in the last episode. I did the intro and then the kitchen alarm went off, which usually means I've got to go downstairs because no one else can reach it. So, so that's obviously bullshit because someone stopped it. So I'm going to stop being the designated fire alarm stopper. Lost my train of thought now. What were we saying now?
Scruffy pubs. It's funny.
Scruffy pubs.
I do feel like I love those kind of venues are to me like the bread and butter of what like an early 20s experience should be. But to recreate that from scratch, I've seen a whole bunch of venues attempt it and fail miserably. And it seems to be something that just kind of happens, or you end up with a just slightly shitty looking venue that doesn't quite hit the spot.
It feels like... Go on.
The culture. You need people to go there and treat it like it's that kind of venue. You can't force it on your regulars. You need it. You need to know. People need to know that you can go to Washington at till 4 and you can still get a G&T or a pint of cask beer at 3:30 in the morning if you want that.
Yeah. And
dance. So all those things need to. There aren't many places in Sheffield that you can get all those things. Where you can get a good pint of cask, some good spirits and mixers with some offers on, and a pint of lager for all the people in your group, and there still be some tunes that you want to be up. You can't just create that. It's a kind of it's an attitude, not a.
It needs to be the perfect convergence of everything, right? It's...
I'm wondering whether it was a conscious decision for Thornbridge to pick their pubs based on they're all all the ones I've thought of so far either do have live music or have somewhere where they could do. So obviously, I mean, I think Ed mentioned it because we used to work at the Greystones. They've got the back room, which is a proper venue. We've even recorded an episode in there, haven't we? Did an episode in there.
We have, yeah.
The Hallamshire does music. The Bath does music, even though it's tiny. I think it's them kind of places.
I think the Stag does. I think the Stag's obviously my local, but that is quite small, and I don't think that they.
It's an odd shape to do something in there.
Yeah, you'd struggle. I think you'd really struggle to be able to do something like that in there.
Yeah, I think a lot of live music in those kind of venues, it just doesn't happen like they did sort of 20 years ago. Like you kind of go to like a decent, like with like the Harley that used to play a lot of live music and had kind of a decent beer on. I think you probably if like live music existed like it does now at that kind of grassrootsy level, which it might do. It might just be I'm getting old and I just don't notice it, but it doesn't feel like you have those small venues anymore. And I think maybe those places would be the places that had good beer on now. I think I think I don't know if I'm just generalizing. I kind of imagine that people who are really into music are probably the people who are quite into craft beers because they're just that kind of person. I'm just going to generalize, but I imagine that there is some correlation somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are dying out. Like, I mean, I've got London as a sample. That's about it. But and very local. But it is something that I have noticed that the independent venues that are good are the ones that tend to care about things like having good drink on and having good food on and all the rest of it. But they are very quickly dying out or being bought up thinking that they're like a cash cow and not realizing that actually a large part of it is the experience of the community that they set. So like we had a great example in London of a place called Seabright Arms, which it used to be one of the best gig venues in London, and was the place where, I saw countless bands there, sort of quite nice small bands. And I think they had like, it was something like 12 cask lines on and a couple of really good keg lines and an amazing bottle fridge. And it was just like this perfect combination of, great music, great beer, fantastic, little bit of a shit to get to, but that's fine. And then Vice bought it. And it was like, not to shit on Vice, but because, Old Blue Last is still one of the best venues in London, I reckon. But they just bought it and just replaced all the lines with really standard, boring lines, and didn't invest in sort of like what they were building from a community point of view. And all of a sudden, it's a very average place with nobody going through there anymore, and you put on a gig and you can't guarantee that people will turn up anymore. And like, yeah, it's a bit sad, but it's I think money is one of the things that's ruining it. But also, I don't know, I blame TikTok as well just because I'm getting old. But
very good. James, how's the Camden Pale? Is it hitting the spot for a nice sunny afternoon listening to some impression?
That was a special moment. Thank you for that. It's all right, actually. Yeah, it's a nice little bit. I mean, it's 4%, and 4% is probably not even session now, is it? It's less than that. It's
junior
strength. Yeah, it's just a really smashable beer. It's nice. It's got a nice taste to it. It's not got anything too like funky going on. It is the kind of thing that I can imagine. I can see myself back there, in the sun shining down, being around friends and drinking it and just having a really good time. It certainly does bring those memories back. Yeah, it's good.
I completely agree because I wasn't familiar with like Reverend the Maker's song titles, so when you said you were going to do that one, I had to look at it and I was like, it did take me back to that. Like, yes, that's like such a perfect beer for that kind of experience, essentially. Yeah, so
I think next, if they do play at the next tram lines, rather than actually getting people with musical instruments, they should just get you
just a microphone
stage. And just
I just improve my beatboxing as well. So do the drums.
I need trumpet on my new album if you want to come on, just saying.
I'll do some practicing. Luke, you just polished off your beer. How was it?
I mean, that was gorgeous, sour, salty. The orange wasn't coming through massively, but it was exactly what I wanted for a Lost Camps beer, in that it was just nice, tart, grabs sort of the side of your mouth, and was quite smashable. I don't even know what the percentage was on it. 4.2, so it was quite good. And I've got a backup here just in case, so it's fine.
Do you mean a second beer while you're away from the family? You can just smash another one in.
The fact that you guys only do one beer on your podcast, it's amateur.
Well, the real ones we do about 4, but since lockdown, it was just we get it
just
more
being
more
responsible.
more
I mean, your house
episodes,
is literally burning down in the background behind you, and you're there like, I'm going to have another beer.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've got a milk
It's
stout
fine.
up next, and I reckon that a bit of smoke will just add to it, so it's fine. A smoked milk stout would be great.
Yeah, we try to keep our episodes under an hour as well, which
we don't do that.
I think your last one was maybe 2 and a bit hours, and I actually listened to it all. So
Mate,
in about 4 stages.
That was 3.5 hours of recording that we did, and I managed to cut it down to 2.5, which was very painstaking because there was a lot of good content there. But it's I think basically 4 beers is a really bad idea if you want to try and keep it under an hour. If you want to keep it under 2 hours, to be honest,
including a very good folk song about a racing pigeon. Which, if you're interested, go listen to the last episode. It's I'm actually moved by it.
I mean, I've never got so emotional about a pigeon before, but
it's some epic folk about a world champion racing pigeon flying to Rome and getting back. And
I mean, it's a standard song that you hear every day, right?
I'll whack it on the end of this episode's playlist for the Spotify thing, and you can all go and listen to it.
It's about 14 minutes long, so maybe you don't want to listen to the whole thing. But
that has got some good trumpet stuff in there. Maybe I could get signed up for that band in the next live rendition. Jim, how's the head? Is he still with us? Good beer.
It's really good, I think. The date on the bottom says 2018, and I suspect I think I've had it in the cellar for about 5, maybe 6 years. Why they've put such a short date on it, on a beer that, whether they actually mean 2118 and then it's boozy, it's bitter, it really bitter, and whether that's from hops or whether that I suspect it's just shitloads of astringency from dark malts. It's really boozy.
Would it help in a mosh pit, or would it hinder?
Never seen you like this.
It would absolutely hinder. I think it's being sat still. Never mind. After this, I think this is not going to go well.
What percentage was it again, Jim?
16.1.
It's 16.1. And you sound quite surprised when you go, it's really boozy. I mean, there's a clue.
You're drinking a bottle of port, basically, aren't you? Let's be honest.
I think I'd prefer a bottle of sherry, if I'm honest.
I think you should go back and revise and do some stoner doom metal now. Sleep.
The entirety of.
Laura, how's yours?
Yeah, by complete contrast to Jim's, I was supposed to be sharing this 7.
We say it looked like a big bottle. Really
drank it all.
Brilliant.
It's really, there's so much going on, but it's really easy to drink, and it's one where you have a sip and then you're like, woo, and you find something new every time you have a different sip. So it's really tart. It's got loads of peach character. It's just got this really nice little woof of smoke over the top. And it's really lovely. I don't know if anybody saw me earlier on have a taste of Jim's, but when he said it before he even opened it. He'd picked the beer that was closest to tar, and I think
French tar, I hope.
It's isn't it?
Yeah, I feel very much like my mouth and body have been paved.
Paved.
I love this. We should do more of this, drinking ridiculously strong. It reminds me, Adam, of when me and you just sat and I think we drank 10 beers between us.
It was that Northern
We tried to keep that
Powerhouse
under
thing,
an hour, didn't we? It was pretty rough by the end.
Yeah, they were all really strong, weren't they? It was that Northern Powerhouse series.
Yeah.
All the
yeah.
we just tried to smash through them all.
Very slurry by the end of that. We should do more of that. We should do more just generally drunk Hopcast. I think it'd be more fun.
Well, I don't know, when can we go back inside pubs?
I think it's
for the
May.
Yeah.
Is it, or June?
I'm trying not to get too attached to dates at the minute. So hopefully, in the next by the time we have the next episode, we'll have all been to the pub. But final words on my beer. Really good beer. I assume there's probably not much of this left now because I think it's been out a while. Because I've had about 5 cans of it or something. I don't know if you still brew it or just brew it once and then that's it.
Awesome.
All of the Unbelievers tend to be one like a single batch anyway. I think there is some still left. I couldn't promise how much or where you'll find it, but
I think that there still is, because obviously with pubs being closed, the canning runs that we've been doing have been a lot bigger. So I think there's still some on the online shop, and it'll still be in shops and things. I think
it's my favourite in memory. It's really good. James, have you had it? You had this one, the margarita one.
I haven't. No,
you like it? Go and get it.
I'm a bit off sours at the moment. I go through these little periods of just being a bit off sours.
I think this was the one that brought it back for me, because I think same. I kind of I think winter I don't tend to have many, and then I really have to have a good one.
In the fridge.
Oh, that's cool. That's quite light.
Is it pink lemonade sour or whatever it was. So I will get to that at some point. I need it to be a bit sunnier.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like I've been on heavy stouts for the last couple months, so been getting through my bearded ladies, and I've even got a buddy. I've got a tattoo.
Can you rephrase
that? No, people can look it up. It's fine. Yeah, and it's only since the sun's come out in the last couple of weeks that I'm like, oh, quite fancy a sour. But that's where I think breweries need to do more like 10% sours. So you've got that transition period where you've got the nice heavy sour that kind of, it's sunny, but it's still cold as fuck.
Well, you can pitch something to Jim. I'm sure he'll brew something.
I think a triple margarita sour.
All right, brilliant. So, Luke, where can people find you guys? What do they need to know if they want to check you guys out?
So we're at rhythmbrews.co if you want to go look for the podcast, or on any good podcast provider, you can look us up, Rhythm and Brews, and on all social media, we're Rhythm Brews UK, because annoyingly we couldn't get the same name across everything. So it's we're out on the 20th of each month, and next month we have Stacey Ayer from Rock Leopard. Which will be great, and then the following month we've actually, hopefully, if we can sort a date, we've got Laura on, which will be great.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
good stuff. So so I think that's. I always forget if I'm hosting, but just for the beer selfie, you got to get your cans up. If you've still got it. Oh, he's moved on now. So...
Here you go. I can do both.
Cheers. Brilliant. So I assume we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. I don't think we've got any plans yet. So if anybody's got any ideas, welcome to get in touch.
We're having a cocktail theme, but that doesn't mean making cocktails. It's still beer, but in some way, got to weave in a cocktail theme.
We still need to make the petrol mix, the beer called petrol mix, don't we?
Maybe this is the opportunity.
I think I've got the beer.
So 2 weeks' time it's beer cocktails again. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Bye.
It's all right. Yeah.